welcome to this week's Hocus Focus, episode 5. I'm Sara Mondaini.
And I'm Thomas Sheridan.
And wow, last week's Sunday night was off the scale, what with Hocus Focus and an unexpected VON. It was a night to remember and I really enjoyed it. And the live chat and the comments on both shows, they were great. And I really love how the viewers can use the live chat as a meeting point and share their love of Fortean with each other. And a man actually wrote in the live chat on the Hocus Focus last week and said that he was in his 50s and he loved this type of stuff, but he felt like he had no one to talk to open-mindedly about it, and he felt quite alone in his love of the Fortean. Well, that's what the live chat's for, so you can have like-minded people to express your thoughts and experiences and opinions to. So please continue to make use of that. It's there for you as a torch to shine on other like-minded people with the same love of high strangeness. So thank you once again for joining us this week and allowing us to be part of your Sunday evening strangeness. And how has the week been for you after that epic 2-episode edition last week?
Yeah, I'm a bit burnt out. It was the intensity of it all, and but it was great fun, and I'm really glad that people still are interested in VON. And so I can't complain, and I concur with everything you said.
So this week's first topic is quite relevant to where we are in the world today. And within human consciousness, there is a concept that transcends physical illness and plagues our minds, and its name is wetico. It's not a biological entity, but a physiological and spiritual affliction that affects both individuals and societies, and it creates a distorted perception of reality and a deep spiritual imbalance that wreaks havoc upon our internal world and then manifests itself as a symptom of its sickness in the external world. And the name wetico is a Native American name for a malevolent force that comes from within us. And this insidious energy or entity manipulates the unconscious aspects of humans, compelling them to act as vessels to carry out its intentions without their awareness. As a collective psychosis, wetico even tries to destroy our human support systems and confuses the lines between our own thoughts and its manipulative influence. Now, this mind affliction acts as a mirror where it reflects the darker characteristics of human nature, and the disorder within the psyche expresses itself in our outer world by creating a contamination which spreads through the collective consciousness and the struggles that we all have within ourselves. And this then manifests as huge societal upheavals and discord, which spreads throughout humanity. It's pretty much what we're seeing today. And Carl Jung warned us that the greatest danger threatening humanity today is the possibility that millions, even billions of us can fall into our own unconsciousness together in a collective psychosis, reinforcing each other's madness in such a way that we become unknowingly complicit in creating our own destruction. When this occurs, humanity finds itself in a situation where we're confronted with and battered by the primal forces of our own psyche. Now, having said all that, wetico is not only a source of evil, but it can also be seen as a blessing, because if we can recognize it, then it loses its influence over us and has the power to awaken us to our inner turmoils, fears, or even ancestral traumas. And this allows for self-awareness and growth. But as what seems to be happening at the moment, it can also perpetuate destruction if it's left unnoticed, making our ignorance the source of a much greater evil. It has no power over our true nature, but it controls us through the false sense of self that it creates within us. And we focus on the external instead of the internal, and we start to become obsessed with what we are not instead of what we are. And it seems that creativity is one of the antidotes to it, and connecting with the heart and tapping into our creative nature, whatever that may be for each individual. If we can awaken from the dream of the illusion we are living in, be aware of it and learn to decouple from it, then we can make ourselves immune to it. This is because wetico is almost quantum in nature, in that how it affects us depends on how we look at it. When we look at the world today, we can clearly see that collective consciousness is suffering from this affliction to the absolute tipping point, and we know it makes people oblivious to their own madness and compels them to act against their own best interests. It functions just outside of our field of consciousness, and to quote Paul Levy, who's wrote several interesting books on the subject, it is a cannibalizing force driven by insatiable greed, appetite without satisfaction, consumption as an end in itself, and war for its own sake against other tribes, species, and nature, and even against the individual's own humanity. So what is it? Is it a lower dimensional energy force, an archon, or jinn? Is it a mind parasite? If it's controlling us, is anybody controlling it for that purpose? Is it a part of the human condition that we've come here to overcome? There's so many questions and a massive, massive topic, and it's very, very relevant to today. So what do you think about wetico, Thomas?
Yes, it's a very sobering subject. I mean, the book, when Paul Levy wrote the book Understanding wetico, when it first came out, I had a few email exchanges back and forth with him. He's a very nice man. And I went through so many things in my mind about it. The language was used was it metaphorical or is it literal? Like when you call it a mind parasite, well, we do know that are parasites and flukes and different kind of things like that do cause humans to behave in a certain way when it affects their brains. Is it a spiritual thing, a conscious thing? And I find that, and if you look at the antidote to it, and he's completely right about creativity. I stopped thinking pretty soon earlier on that it was an actual real virus, an actual biological thing, and came to the conclusion that it was some kind of what Carl Jung called the diseases of the personality on a collective level. And the the purpose of using creativity seems to distract the mind from this force. It seems that this force is very much rooted in primal fears and rumination, constant rumination. And it's well known that being creative prevents rumination and circular thinking. And this thing was very apparent, it seemed, during the last 3 years, very much so, that it caused irrational fears, and it also caused people to change completely and show. And I used to think, well, it is the real personality, but it wasn't, because they got normal again afterwards. And so I'm under the kind of like belief now that it's exactly what I spoke about in my second book, Defeat the Demons. It's a consciousness parasite in psychopathic society. There is a parasitical force in consciousness that basically harvests energy somehow. And it's not a million miles from how it was the Native Americans describe it in the book wetico, Understanding wetico. And this chaos that it causes releases huge amounts of psychic energy, and that's what feeds it. Hence the parasitic cannibalization aspect of it. Also, it's totally dependent upon focus upon it. So it creates a miserable experience. There's a miserable sense in society. It feeds upon it. And it's the time with this week's psychic weather. And I often say to people, be very careful, don't self-hex yourself or self-hex things into reality. Even when it seems like they're pretty close, you can actually make it worse. And I think that actually spreads the mind virus too. So you have people in the alternative scene who are like, oh, this is coming, the worst is coming, the worst is coming. well, this actually feeds it. This actually feeds it. Where, it, it doesn't happen if it doesn't until it happens. Is a much better attitude to have towards it, and to then, because if you concentrate on this thing, it demands your attention, it demands your rumination, and I think this is how it functions. And yeah, I think almost Paul Levy has produced a very significant work, writing the two books on wetico. Well, I think he's more than two now. But Diverse and Understanding wetico is a vital book to read for understanding mass psychosis and mass hysteria. And we say to ourselves, humans have this propensity for self-destruction. It's not. It's the thing. It's this wetico thing that's inside humans that causes the self-destruction. There's something, an alien force, whatever it is, a trans-dimensional force. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely a force of consciousness that's parasitic. It's not a virus. That's how I feel about it.
I tend to agree with you. Like it's some kind of non-human force that operates just outside of our visible light, and it feeds off our negative emotions and fear.
Yeah.
And I think when you talked about the spiritual force that overtook this planet in 2020, that it could have been the same kind of, come from the same place that this wetico comes from, or it could even be the same force, and it's a self-fulfilling cycle because it just feeds itself over and over and over.
It lays an egg inside consciousness, and then the egg hatches and goes to another one, and it seems to begin with like fear and paranoia. That seems to be a major aspect of it. If you look at all the history where you've had these mass changes in society, where, say, you've had sectarian conflicts and things like that, it's usually rooted in fear. This thing usually uses fear to get in there.
It also seems to like bad copies as well. Like it treats, when it gets a hold of you, it takes you away from what you really are and kind of mimics itself as how it is. So you become a bad copy of a human being. You're not you're not showing your true humanity.
Well, when we see someone fall in with a bad crowd, that's a classic example of it. You see someone who had no issue with, had no problems with them, he got on fine, and then they fell under the influence of a certain crowd, gang, or circle, and they became, like you said, a copy of that group, like, and started to mimic them. That the other person that they were was gone. So definitely, it needs organizational structure of some form. It definitely needs organizational structure. There's no doubt about that. So whether that be groups of people, tribes, whatever, this is why companies go insane. This is how office workplaces go insane. This is how governments go insane. How, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a whole organizational structure becomes full of lunatics, seem to be destroying the company. And I think that's where this comes from. That's it. It needs an organizational structure somehow in order to move effectively within the org. I think that's why cults who live in the same compound and things like that, it totally seeks them out.
It reminds me of like binary numbers. Because if it mimics itself, it repeats itself in the next human being, and then it gets stronger every time. And then that human being then takes on the characteristics of the first person who it's affected, and then it goes on all down the line.
Yeah, the digital gin, and also the Neoplatonic and Gnostic version of archons is not a million miles from that either. It said that, like, when the Gnostics in the later stages were, this would be the time leading up to Christianity, we're talking about the archons. They were very much talking about the bureaucracy in the Roman Empire, the bureaucratic structure. And we've seen how, like, bureaucracies in civil service and so on can be suddenly filled. Like we see at the moment, the whole thing of, like, it seems that the teach. I'm not going to, you know what I'm talking about. I don't want to say the term, but should we say the unsacred hermaphrodite, how it has taken over all aspects of government, like a psychic wildfire, the educational system, parents thinking their children might be profane hermaphrodites. The only thing that can explain that is something like wetico.
Yes, and it makes you, where did it start? I mean,
Yep.
it's been coming down the road slowly for a number of years now, and I think it's like a rolling stone or a snowball, just gathers
Well,
momentum.
it's always been there, but it was dependent on localized structures because of the nature of communications. We now have social media and it can spread all over the world in minutes.
Yeah.
It uses social media. Things like TikTok seem very archontic with Tico nature to me. Remember that we had all the dancing doctors and nurses during the lockdown. That was pure with Tico, that was. And it was dependent upon, and again, they couldn't think of anything original. One group did it and then they all copied it. None of them could think of anything original. They all began copying each other because of this base level parasite inside them.
That's what it seems to be, all about mimicking and copying, but bad copies, nothing creative on it's nothing that's creative from the mind, it's just copying.
Yeah, yeah. It creates mimic behaviors, and whether they're beastly or ghastly. I think you look at, there's a book called The Psychopathic Left about, like, basically the guy puts forward a very plausible argument that people who are Marxist inclined are mentally ill. And then he goes about, like, the horrific horrors of the Bolsheviks, and, like, there's one particularly graphic section on there, the communists in Budapest, just absolutely slaughtering people in the basements of buildings, and he called it like a basic mental illness, that these people are drawn to mental illness. But I think that that's a classic example of it as well. This is why they love Marxism, Bolshevism. They love the rules and regulations. They love strict protocols, because these things. This is why they love, like, these flying saucer cults that all live in the same house and stuff like that. They don't. The Wetiko mind virus doesn't like having to be confronted with people who are creative thinkers. So Paul Levy was bang on the money when he said that about the creativity is the way out, and also individualism. Individual thinking. That's the way out too. But yeah, I mean, the history of the world is resplendent in that. But the problem is now we have the social media and the social media. I mean, I've got to the point now where I actually think most human beings are not psychologically or spiritually developed enough to be on social media. It's the classic thing that Joseph Campbell said, that modern human beings are always creating new mythologies that compensates for changes in societies. But since the Industrial Revolution, these compensatory mythologies have lagged further and further behind. We're nowhere near the state now, unless you're someone who, like, the one compensatory thing we do have on social media is memes. But if you see the kind of people who can meme, and a certain type can't meme, well, that's the can't meme because they're not creative, but they're more likely to be the ones who will support the woke agenda and the unsacred hermaphrodites. I mean, there's days I think that social media should be shut down permanently. We have this argument with AI, and people are saying, do we shut AI down? In fact, AI, when you think about it, is very wetico in nature, because all it does, it's a gigantic copy and mimic. It really doesn't create anything. It just takes what already exists and just reformats it. So that's very wetico as well.
I'm wondering, the psychic, we talked earlier about the psychic energy that this thing can release due to the traumas that it creates on the earth. And I'm wondering if those psychic energy releases can create things like tulpas and egregores and things like that. And that's why maybe we see lots of auguries and warnings.
I've definitely encountered entities or something that wasn't a person, that wasn't created by a bot as a fake account. And you can have the strangest conversations with them. And they also seem to know who's died, and they steal this person's identity and they take it over as a kind of an egregore online. So this is why it's, the greatest gift that the human race ever gave to wetico was social media, because it's all there, energy harvesting, the whole lot. And mimicry, yeah, it's all about, like, well, here's an example of it. It's either your Ukrainian flag, a black square, or wherever countries had a disaster. Like when you see people who don't live in Hawaii, who live in England or live in Germany, putting down that they were marked safe from a Hawaiian fire, you know that's wetico in there, because it makes no sense. Why would you tell people we don't even live in that part of the world and everyone knows that you're safe from it? No, that's the wetico thing again. That someone else did it, I must do it. And we saw that in the last 3 years, and we're still seeing it. That it's, I think, like people like Paul Levy are the universe. They're like prophets. In fact, they are prophets that just before the age when their work will be helpful to others, they manifest and write. They get downloads and write books like Understanding Wetico.
I think the social media is a very double-edged sword, isn't it? It's a crazy place, and like you say, quite happy for it to shut down some days. But then on the other side of it, if you're a creative individual, it enables people to come together, like the people watching this and the people that we know within our social media profiles, to come together and find each other and kind of be a light in the darkness. But then it's almost like as payment for that, you have to deal with all the crap that comes on these social medias as well. You've got to sift through all that as well.
Yeah, it's like a macrocosm of the microcosm of society, and extended into the digital world. Yeah, but it's a real force, and again, creativity is the way out. I think that's why memes are so powerful, because you might have a situation in the media or something, like like people changing their flags, of a country that's being at war or something. That's pure wetico. That there's no, that you're pretending you care when you don't, and looking for virtue signaling. I think virtue signaling and the need for virtue recognition has a strong wetico element in it. It's like, I couldn't give a shit about anybody, but I'm going to pretend I do. And I think that's a huge part. That's also psychic energy when you think about it. It's harvesting it. Oh, she must be wonderful. She changed her profile picture to a Ukrainian flag, etc., etc., etc. And so that seems to be a big element of it as well.
The talking about how the world is today, the British biologist Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, I'm sorry, he says that the development and behaviour of all living organisms are moulded by a field of energy, which behaves as if it's being controlled by a universal consciousness. And he also suggests that human societies are governed by social and cultural thinking, which embraces all organisms and all that we live and all that lives within an organization. And he says that although we're comprised of thousands and thousands of individual human beings, a society can function and respond as a unified one by the characteristic of a more fake unified field. It's manipulated by it. It's hard to explain, and when I read it, I know what he means, but it's hard for me to kind of convey.
Yeah. And the fact that someone tried to stab him to death at a conference for putting that theory forward.
Say what?
Someone tried to stab him to death in a conference. That's why he did. He was away for years, not doing talks. He was doing a conference, I think it was in Japan, and someone tried to kill him over that theory. Yeah, and he was stabbed, and he was quite badly hurt. But that shows you that, that these people, these forces, if they see a threat in the field, they renfield lower levels of life, and they will they'll try to manifest that we're in a low level consciousness, someone with a very poor intellect or someone with a very low psychic firewall, and try to use them as a weapon or something. Usually it's just attacks on the internet. They'll take the dregs of humanity, the flotsam of the electromagnetic spectrum, and these entities will affect them. And that's 99.99% of it. What happened to Rupert Sheldrake is extremely rare, but it still happened. But it kind of gives credibility to his morphic resonance concept, that it's a singular organism behind these structures, and there's a real one, which is a sort of a natural forming, we call it the God mind, or whatever you want to call it, the Maya, and then there's a kind of a simulation that takes. You see, there's a difference between a matrix and a simulation. A simulation is being controlled by someone else, where the matrix is controlled by collective unconsciousness, or whatever you want to call it. The Maya would be a better way of putting that. And wetico seems to be the lord of the simulation, and its necessity is to replace the Maya with a simulation.
Again, it's a copying again, isn't it? Mimicking.
Exactly. Yeah, the simulation is not. It's just like it's AI at a spiritual level, spiritual AI.
And in everything that's mimicked, everything's inverted as well. So everything that should be good is bad. Everything that should be working for us is working against us, men and women.
Yeah, exactly. And it can't create, so it destroys creativity. That's why they've had cancer culture and comedy and stuff like that. You saw the Graham Linehan thing in Scotland.
So that's wetico, a sickness of the soul, and be interesting to hear your own thoughts and feelings on the subject and how you think it's affecting the world around us. It's pretty tangible. It's out there. So if you have any theories of your own on wetico, or you've experienced it in your own life, perhaps in the workplace, which where it can be quite prevalent, please do let us know in the comments. We're very interested to read them. For this week's folk horror cinema, we are reviewing a 2012 British supernatural horror film called When the Lights Go Out, directed by Pat Holden, based on a true story. It stars Kate Ashfield, Stephen Waddington, and Craig Parkinson, and it's based on a true story known as the Black Monk of Pontefract, who haunted the home of Joe and Jean Pritchard at number 30 East Drive in Pontefract, West Yorkshire. It became well known outside of Pontefract when Colin Wilson wrote a book about it in 1981. And the movie is set in 1974 during the infamous power cuts, and Len and Jenny Maynard, played by Stephen Waddington and Kate Ashfield, move into a new home on a council estate with their daughter Sally. And the house is haunted by the ghost of a young girl who creates a lot of poltergeist activity, and this causes problems in the relationships between the family due to the stress that it causes. Sally's history teacher, Mr. Price, played by Martin Compston, uncovers the cause of the haunting, a murdered girl and a predatory monk, and he informs the father of the history of this. And the family seek help from both a paranormal specialist and a priest, but their encounter with the spirits become dangerous, and during a seance they discover that the spirit of the young girl refuses to leave the house because she's protecting the family, in particular the 13-year-old daughter, from the evil demonic spirit of the monk, and she'd been causing the poltergeist activity in an attempt to try and frighten them away so they would leave. The dad, Len, and his friend Brian, played by Craig Parkinson, then pressure Father Clifton, who's played by Gary Lewis, into performing an exorcism. And Father Clifton explains the monk's dark past and that while alive, he preyed upon young girls in the neighbourhood and cut their tongues out so they couldn't expose him. He then conducts what appears to be a successful exorcism, and life returns to normal for a while. However, the monk returns, that is indeed if he ever did leave, and he attacks Sally and tries to hang her so that he can keep her soul in the house with him. The parents try to save her, but the spirit knocks them unconscious, and it is the other spirit of the young murdered girl who appears and confronts the evil monk, which is then driven from the house. Now, for me, this film went deeper because as someone who grew up in a haunted house in the 1970s, in 1970s Northern England, the film had an additional layer of effect, and it brought back vivid memories and emotions of that unsettling time in my own life. And the portrayal of the familiar toys and games and records and the way of life from the 1970s will most definitely be a visual doorway to the past for viewers who lived through that time. And the nostalgia and the suspense create this powerful juxtaposition that was on my mind a long time after the film had finished. And what made it even more unsettling was the supernatural aspect, mixing it in with everyday life and the absence of Hollywood glamour. And it's very different to the flashy presentations that you see in typical horror productions. Instead, this film is more of a raw portrayal of Northern life, sans Ken Loach, and the film's depiction of real Northern life during that era was a perfect example of hauntology, showing how the supernatural can be fixed in our own past experiences. And I was transported back to my own haunted house memories. And this realism will be quite an emotional connection for those who, like me, grew up in a similar setting. So when the lights go out, it's more than just a haunted house supernatural film. It's a journey into the past and a good reflection of real Northern life, and its ability to evoke nostalgia puts it above and beyond your typical horror genre, and I really enjoyed it.
I would have to say that it's almost like a hauntological film than it is a horror film. There was things I loved about it and things that were like, I didn't really care much for. They definitely captured that period in the 70s perfectly. That was my childhood right there. And even down to the fashions and even the way the kind of female actresses moved. Like I remember my mother and my aunts kind of being like dressed and walking like that and down the street. That was very well done. Obviously, they put a lot of work into the aesthetic. I don't think they put the same amount of work into the story. The story itself, I found interesting that the whole concept that the monk had murdered this girl because she was literate, and cutting out her tongue wasn't enough because she'd be able to write down what he did to her. So that's why he ended up killing her. And I liked all that, but her appearance at the end was a bit corny, or I don't know. It just wasn't. It was too much like a superhero film or something. That kind of ending. Now there was elements of it that they underplayed that were certainly very powerful. The concept of the room and never going into that room again. I love the haunted room. The room being a kind of that could have been explored at a much deeper level as a maybe kind of a portal or something like that. They did, one of the reasons I don't like the Steven Spielberg movie Poltergeist is that it's basically this whole American family, perfect all American stuff. That's one of the reasons I think his films have aged so badly. This film was the opposite. The story wasn't the best, but the actual aesthetic that was fantastic. So did I enjoy it? Yes. I thought the characters were quite well. I actually loved the characters who played the parents. I didn't really care much for the English teacher, the school teacher guy. And the thing with Black Maid and the priest was a bit, again, it was corny like the ending, It would have been much better, I think, to have actually brought the priest in and let him experience the paranormal firsthand and then got him that way. But I think that kind of like they wrote a kind of Father Ted kind of element into it was a bit naff, I thought. But I think the concept of having made a character out of the room was a huge loss, you know. And in fact, the original Colin Wilson story it's based on is very, very different, and not very different, but a fair bit different. And they changed this film. They changed the story to make it be more cinematic, I believe. But in the process, I think it's good, it's predictable, it's well cast, particularly the family. The family are wonderful. The actors and how that's portrayed. It transported me in that hauntological way back to the 1970s as a kid. But otherwise, I don't think I'll be watching it again. I didn't hate it, but it didn't. It didn't impress me that much.
It actually reminded me, it had the aesthetic of an old play for today rather than a movie.
But that was a strength that it
Yeah.
didn't play on, because I mean, you know, they could have really, you know, they could have made the room a character, a scary character using that. And also the destruction of the family could have been done better, because this thing would have been like a mind virus too, wrecking. Now they finally got a nice council house, and now that's crap happens, you know, this kind of thing, and they're happy. And I thought that, you know, that was, but it was just, I know she didn't go in the room ever again. They kind of left it at that. I don't know whether they were planning a sequel based on the room or something, but to me, the real the mum character just wasn't interesting to me. It was like predictable. Oh, you know, bit of an old ghost kind of thing. But you know, it would have been better if the ghost was never seen, but the room itself became the monster. That's just me. I think that would work better.
Yeah, and I think the 1970s decor would have helped to amp up the creepiness of that, because that whole beigey amber coloured aesthetic of the house, everything was kind of brown and big flowers where even the wallpaper looked creepy.
Yeah, and a miasma of non-stop cigarette smoke. The, you know, mother smoking at home in front of the kids in the living room. They could have so many things like that they could have done. You know, it's very easy for me to sit here and say, "Oh, I would have made that film better," and I know that's like a nasty kind of thing to say about the people who made it. Because, but I do think there was. I wouldn't say I could have made it better, but I think there was many lost opportunities to make that an amazing film.
Yeah, like you say, that film was loosely based on a true story, but they did amp it up a little bit for the sake of the cinematography. But that house, number 30 in Pontefract, that you can actually go on book to go and visit that house. They do local, I mean, I wouldn't go, but they do for those that are interested, they do local ghost hunts and overnighters at that house.
Yeah, like the Lizzie Borden house in Fall River is now a B&B, and you can stay there. You know, I wanted to do it too, but it was booked out.
Even in the movie, they've only found out it was haunted 5 minutes, and he's charging everybody £1 to go in and have a look.
That was a part I really liked. That part I really liked, because we know that the kind of people we grew up with, that's what they do, you know.
And when she came home from work in a thick Yorkshire accent, and what the bloody hell are you doing? This is my bloody house.
That stuff was wonderful. But the school teacher annoyed me. I don't know why. He just, I'm sure he's a good actor and everything. He didn't seem comfortable in the part. And this kind of like, they had like what you call it, you know, a up version of the lone gunman, the priest, the paranormal investigator, and the school teacher. It didn't work. It got kind of silly. Especially when they blackmailed the priest because he was knobbing his housekeeper. That to me was just it just didn't work.
And another comedy element of it was the father and his best friend who was going to go upstairs first. He said, "You go up first," and he said, "No, it's your bloody house, you go up first." And it was a bit of a comedy duo there over who would go up into the house first.
Yeah, and those scenes only work if the following scene is absolutely petrifying, and you didn't get that.
But if you're into 1970s aesthetic and hauntology, then it's definitely worth a watch, especially if you grew up around that time. You get to see all the toys and games from that time and the music and the vinyl singles on the floor, and some of the TV programs that they were watching, and the massive brown flowered wallpaper. It's all in there.
Yeah, but I think a film that did that better was the Enfield Poltergeist. And it was set in London, but I think that did that 70s thing better. And I think it was a much better story and much better written.
Is that the one with Timothy Spall in it?
I don't know. It's the one about two girls in the council estate in Enfield, and they play it. The main character is not so much. Well, they have a paranormal investigator is compensating for his daughter who was killed in a car crash, so he kind of adopts the kid. But they had a very good character playing the tabloid journalist, and the tabloid journalist in the Enfield Poltergeist played that part much better than the school teacher in this film. Okay. Also, when the lights went out, a bit of there was another lost opportunity there, because you could have had a situation where they had no control over the electricity, and because of the power cuts, and they're living in dread of the lights going out because the entity will appear again, and they can't switch them back on. That to me is real terror there. And it could also play into the concept of the ordinary person being at the mercy spiritually of the bureaucracy and of the governmental unions. Real world spiritual things impacting on a spiritual event. So yeah, I mean that's the movie for me. Lost opportunities and could have been way better. It wasn't crap. I'm glad I watched it, but I won't be watching it again.
I like the concept of it was a haunted house within a council estate, because it also brought in the concept of the deep town and the things that had gone on there in the past, and then it swept it all under the carpet, like so many of these places in England and other places, and then they built a shiny new council estate on the top and just hoped that the past would disappear, but that's not how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, it still wasn't done properly. It could have been done so much better. What film that was really done amazing was Quake the Master in the Pit, where they find the alien spaceship under the tube station extension and that scene with Barbara Shelley, and she goes Hobbs Lane, Hobbs End. That's an old Anglo-Saxon word for the devil. I mean, that's building the tension up. You know what I mean? And then they go to the old church, and it has the medieval manuscript talking about demons and goblins were seen in a Hobbs End. That's how you do it, and they missed out on that. Yeah, I would rather they'd done a proper paranormal investigation and blackmail the Catholic priest.
Because he did bring the paranormal investigators in, didn't he? The medium and her husband.
It's almost like the movie was made by people who didn't really know what the paranormal world is really like.
Yeah. So that's when the lights go out. I believe if you want to watch it, it is doing the rounds on Amazon Prime, or that's where you can find it at the moment if you want to give it a try.
And now it's part of the show. We come to Sarah and the psychic hygiene. Will we need a new conditioner to wash away the weticos? Well, let's find out. Here's Sarah.
We all know that the ego has a way of magnifying fear, creating apprehension, even when it's not warranted. It's like an old habit we've unwittingly cultivated, being afraid even in the absence of real danger. But fear doesn't have to be a constant companion. As we face the circumstances in our lives, pause for a moment and ask yourself, am I genuinely scared? If the answer is yes, take a closer look at what exactly is causing that fear. Your spirit holds the key to understanding this, and don't be surprised if after some thought you realise that fear might just be a habit that you've grown accustomed to. And now here's the magic part. Your spirit is more than equipped to handle whatever challenges come your way, and it's ready to step up and guide you on your journey. And the moment you break free from the chains of habitual fear, you'll find yourself eagerly welcoming your higher self's guidance on this adventure called life. Trust in your inner wisdom and smile at your fears, because more often than not, they're not the gigantic monsters lurking in the shadows that they might first appear to be. Instead, they're just shadows, tricksters born from the contrast between the dim light that the ego prefers and the radiant brilliance of your spirit. So work on shifting your perspective and bid adieu to the habits of fear as you discover your inner courage and start to remember that you're more powerful than you think. And in light of the possible turbulent times ahead, that is my psychic hygiene suggestion for this week.
And a very good one too, anxiety. Anxiety is a terrible thing because it can also often lead to irrational fears, things that, they don't, the whole thing is, it doesn't happen till it happens, but anxiety can play on these things, and it can become a fertile garden for larger fears and phobias. And society is designed to keep people in their jobs and everything, employers even, to keep people in a constant state of anxiety. And when you look back on your life, you realized how many years you wasted on anxiety, which is a low-level fear that often causes you terrible problems in your life and stress and unhappiness, and it was all for nothing. So yeah, I mean, it's not that you shouldn't be afraid or wary or shut your fears off, but always remember that there's a distinct difference between anxiety and fear, and don't confuse anxiety for fear, because anxiety will become fear then.
The brain's a really amazing thing because it cannot tell the difference between something that you're actually experiencing and something that you're thinking about. So, for example, if you're learning the piano and you're learning the piano physically, your brain registers that. But if you sit down and you go through the keys in your mind, the brain can't tell the difference between you practicing physically and practicing in the mind. And it's the same with fear. So the brain can't tell the difference whether you're actually experiencing something real that's making you afraid or anxious, or whether you're just sat there ruminating on something that might never happen. And it has the same detrimental effect on your overall health of your body. So it's important.
Yeah, it has no direct correlation with the nervous system. Yeah. So the central nervous system is involved in playing the piano, and your brain doesn't know it, like I said, if it's playing the piano or thinking about playing the piano. But that's a very good way of learning things as well. You can visualize them in your head, and it's a very good way of the neural partition, building new muscle memory muscles, as they call it. Well, yeah, it doesn't know the difference. It doesn't know that's why when you're frightened at a horror film, your brain produces all the same neurochemicals that would happen if you're attacked by a wolf in the wild.
Yeah, the brain can't tell the difference.
Yeah, it's a fail-safe mechanism. It just kicks in.
So it's okay to be afraid, but don't live there.
Yeah, and don't let anxiety become something it shouldn't. And our second topic tonight covers the mysterious disappearance of a 20-year-old pilot named Frederick Valentich, crossing the Bass Strait between Southern Australia and Tasmania in late October 1978. While planes disappear all over the world, particularly small aircraft like his own Cessna aircraft, what makes this story particularly interesting is that Frederick Valentich said that he was followed by a strange light right before his plane vanished. At the same time, a few hours previously, and a day before as well, people in southern Australia had reported UFO activity in the area. Now, he maintained radio contact with the air traffic controller until the point he vanished. And his last words were about seeing a green light, and then he was gone. No, not then he was gone. Plane has never been found. He's never been found. Now, ufology at the time, being 78 and everything, was still very much caught up in the whole alien possessed thing. And so they were said he was abducted by a UFO and taken away and all this kind of thing. That was very common in those days. But when you look into the story, it gets stranger and stranger. Now, the official explanations are kind of interesting too. One was that they claimed he was flying upside down and he was mistaking the sea at night for the sky. Now, this is impossible for two reasons. And this was also used in the famous Flight 19 story in the Bermuda Triangle when a squadron of American fighters belonging to the US Navy vanished in the Bermuda Triangle not long after World War II. They claimed that they were probably flying upside down as well. I don't know how you fly upside down without noticing it. You'd feel yourself falling out of your seat and you're only being held in by your, safety strap. You'd know you were upside down. Your hat would fall off. Pilots always wore caps back then, and this kind of thing. But more interestingly, is that the Cessnas and many aircraft, many propeller-driven aircraft, up even to today, have a gravity feed fuel system. So there's not a fuel pump. It's to save power on the plane. They have a gravity system where literally the fuel goes down by gravity into feeding the engine. Wouldn't work if you're flying upside down. The plane would just instantly run out of fuel. So that's impossible. But it just goes to show you the extent that the authorities will go to explain something they can't explain. Now, his father, Frederick Valentich's father, said that his son was fascinated by UFOs. I want to get back to that in a second because that could be very, very important. Now, the other explanations given by the authorities was that he faked his own disappearance. He was supposed to fly to a place called King Island, which is halfway between Tasmania and southern Australia. And he was supposed to, that water's very rough. If you were to go down in that water, it's you're not going down in the tropics. You're going down into, pretty cold water. It's the southern part of Australia, with a climate similar to the Britain and Ireland. And the route, that Strait of Bass Strait, is a very rough sea. So faking your disappearance is the worst possible place to do it. It's just so dangerous. It's so risky. They said that he had been cautioned and nearly prosecuted for dangerous flying prior to this, including doing things he wasn't supposed to do. But again, that seems to me like they just pulled something out. Pulled something. Apparently, the story was he was collecting crayfish from Bass Island to go back to a market in Melbourne. Now, so the authorities don't have a good explanation for this. Okay, I don't think they have anyway. But what I find interesting was the fact that his father said absolutely he was a UFO fanatic. He was obsessed by the UFOs, and now we're in a different world. Did he create a tulpa? He kept apparently told his father he was afraid of UFOs, that they might actually get him in his plane one day. And the thing he didn't like about flying was that he was afraid that UFOs might get him up there. Did his fears generate over the Bass Strait of this experience of the light? Did he create a tulpa and possibly crash the plane, trying to fly away from it or something else even more mysterious happened? But that's what made me, there are numerous stories of pilots seeing strange lights and things happening. But this one was the only one I know of that the actual pilot was a UFO nut. Now, people say, oh, he obviously made the story, his imagination run away with him. But the power of imagination, you can bring these things into reality. You really can. I mean, there's videos of guys online actually creating UFOs using their mind, generating them in the sky. And it could have been something like that, but he didn't fully understand that he was doing it. He genuinely thought, there's a UFO chasing me. He got more frightened. The UFO got bigger and brighter, got closer to him through this trauma and fear. So I think I'm going to put that in another part of the mix. While the UFOlogy stuff still concentrates on flying metal saucers with space aliens inside, I would like to go to a kind of a more psychic kind of effect, a phenomena like a tulpa, and maybe even the aircraft exploded through something like a catalytic exteriorization phenomena caused by his own nervous system. And being in the state he was in, the heightened is it sounds like his nervous system was at an extremely heightened state. So that was Frederick Valentich's disappearance over the Bass Strait in southern Australia. And also, like I said, it brings to mind Flight 19. Flight 19, one of the radar transmissions said the sun and the sky are in the wrong place. And there's a very interesting theory that is plausible that they probably turned the wrong direction and mistook east for west. And instead of flying towards Florida, they were the wrong way round and flew out into the Atlantic until they ran out of fuel. That's plausible, but the squadron was being led by a highly experienced pilot who would have had the skills to compensate for these kinds of things. And then we have the Malaysian airplane that disappeared in the Indian Ocean. And the wreckage that was found, and I have very serious doubts if that wreckage is authentic, was thousands of miles from where the plane should have been. And it was almost like this plane vanished off the radar and then disappeared in a place where it shouldn't have been. So that's, although the main story is Frederick, Valentich's story in 1978 in the Bass Strait and his plane and him disappearing and a UFO event connected to it. I often think there's something very strange with these stories in general. And I think one of the reasons, I don't think, for instance, the Bermuda Triangle story would have endured if it wasn't for Flight 19, that squadron of fighters that vanished. So, Sarah, what do you think of all this stuff?
I think it's the unknowing of where these planes have gone that's the spookiest thing, because they just disappear and they're never seen again. I know that with the Frederick Valentich case, there was a report of a man who had actually taken some photographs of the green light, who was independent of Frederick Valentich. But I don't know how strong a tulpa would need to be for it to be captured on film or for other people to be seeing it as well. That would have to be some pretty intense psychic energy, that.
Well, it also brings, it also could be something like the spook lights and the fairy lights you spoke about on last week's episode.
Yeah.
But also there's the issue of there had been a UFO flap the day before that was well publicized I think it was in Melbourne. And him being a UFO head would have been very, wow, that, he would have been watching the news like crazy, reading the newspapers, maybe collecting the clippings, really fascinated by it. And so when he took off flying for Bass Island or King Island in the Bass Straits, he was probably, I don't know what this is, that kind of thing, so extreme. And you need a lot of psychic energy anyway to fly a small aircraft on your own at night. Anyway, there's massive concentration. And like Connell Wilson, in his Beyond the Occult book, spoke about states of massive concentration when you have to do something that's so dangerous that it actually alters reality. So I'm just saying, but there has to be a connection. There's now this. You could also throw the third element into it, the military. That the military were testing some kind of weapons, and he got in the way of them.
Could it be something like what you mentioned in the psychic weather, where when you talk about the doomers, you have to be careful, because if you're going to if you keep going through what your thoughts are things, and you can create things through thoughts. So did he actually create a real UFO? And it took him, because he created that reality for himself.
Yeah, and catalytic exteriorization phenomena is I've seen it firsthand. Someone had lost their temper and a glass table shattered in the living room. And they didn't drop anything or throw anything on it. It was just the sheer explosion of rage smashed the glass tabletop into like millions, almost dust. I often have a theory about 9/11 that being caused all the psychic energy of all these people focusing on the building as if they blew it up with their minds or something. I'm not saying that happened. I'm just saying I've gone through all these kinds of things. Don't go nuts. if you hear me say this. I'm not saying that I'm absolutely believing it, but the human mind can do remarkable things. It can, especially if he did see a light that was probably a bit odd, and then suddenly it blows it up into something else. And he would have been in a heightened state. I don't buy the thing that he staged his own disappearance, because it's an extremely dangerous way to do it in that place anyway. And I don't, I think that they've taken the UFO thing, and there's his father who's the source of this. Also, his most famous transmission on the radio was, "It's not an aircraft." No, I find that, and that's to me, I find I almost shuddered when I read that. It's not. He maintained it is not an aircraft, and it was 1,000 feet above him, which is not that high up. And then this engine started going crazy, and then he said, acting, the sputtering on the Cessna. Now that was the main reason they brought it, that he was flying upside down and the gravity field system cut out. But it would cut out instantly. He wouldn't have gotten. He'd been saying this for a good while to air traffic control. It's 1,000 feet above me, and it's not an aircraft. And that was his last transmission.
You can sometimes tell if it's a cover-up for something, because they did it with him when they said he might have faked his own death, or he was flying upside down, or he was a bit crazy with the UFO thing. And they did it with the pilot on flight 370, the Malaysian flight. They tried to blame the pilot and actually put a report out that he'd been sleeping with the other stewardesses over a course of a few months, because his marriage was breaking up, and he was very depressed. So he may have done something on purpose. And that, to me, smacks of something else, that it's a scapegoat for something else they don't want you to know about. Like, it might have been a missile that took it down by mistake.
That happened, a flight between Bristol, I think it was, and Cork in the early 1960s. An Aer Lingus flight disappeared. It was the only plane Aer Lingus have ever lost in their history. It vanished off the well, I can't remember the name of the lighthouse, the famous lighthouse down there, but and disappeared in the Celtic Sea, between sort of like Pembroke and Wales, and Waterford and Ireland. And years later came out that the British Navy were testing a new kind of missile in the area, so they could have accidentally shot the plane down. But that was always put on it. Now, what you've mentioned there about Valentich, perhaps it was a staged disappearance, and they were moving. Maybe the military wanted him in as a pilot in doing black ops or something. You do wonder about these things. Maybe they wanted him to work in black ops, and they staged his thing. But it's a very unsettling story when you read about it. Like, the more you think about it, it goes from being, okay, his guy thought he saw a UFO and he crashed a plane, but then you start the connotations of it. You start seeing and thinking about the whole strangeness and the whole diversity of the UFO thing, and it hits you. Like, the sky is a strange place, I imagine, at times. Especially if you're flying alone. Like, you're in a small aircraft, you're flying at night across the sea, and it's just you and your thoughts, and you're kind of in an altered reality when you think about it. And as a strong meditative quality, and I'm sure, like, a lot of pilots see things and experience things up there. We had the story of the plane that crashed, the Eastern Airline one, about the pilots appearing in the replaced compartments. Those things always happen when the plane was in the air, never when it was on the ground. I found that very interesting. So, I'm sure pilots experience and see things all the time, but don't report them because they're afraid they're going to have their commercial license taken off them.
I have a bit of a thought, a musing about the flight 370 Malaysian flight. When I was doing some research about it, I read one of the possibilities could have been that the plane vertically dropped out of the sky and into the ocean, and down to the bottom of the sea. And it's down there. And I'm wondering, because it was 10 years ago now, and I'm wondering, did that plane suffer a fate that is now the same as the Titanic wreckage? And is it something that might be best left where it is? Because there's talk that they're going to go and have another look for it this year or next year. And I can understand them wanting the black box to try and understand what really happened. But as for searching the bottom of the ocean for something that's been gone for almost 10 years, I just think that's a bit, don't know about that.
I also don't know how they could find it in that area. I mean, the Indian Ocean is absolutely colossal. When you stand at the end of Sri Lanka and you look south, which I've done, the next thing is Antarctica. Thousands and thousands of and remember, I was on the equator, and the next place was Antarctica. That's how big the ocean is there. So that was a hard one. But you're right. That's a very good point you brought up. That Air Malaysia flight, MH, whatever it was, did take on a spooky atmosphere, energy about it. It was more than just a plane going down in the sea. And that's why I think people were quick to say, was it hijacked by bandits or something who stole it, or the Russians? There was loads of stories like that going on. But you're right, there was something very dark about that plane's fate. And it was more than just a sad story of a human tragedy. That there was that same. I can remember distinctly getting spooked out by it when it happened.
If you want to get really Fortean about it, then there is the idea about an aircraft entering an alternate dimension, which comes from quantum physics and the concepts of parallel universes. And it is actually theorized that if a unique set of circumstances did occur, which might involve rips or tears in the fabric of space-time, then that could lead to a momentary breach between our reality and another dimension, just like the other topic we talked about a few episodes back about the church was it Devon, where some people were walking through a churchyard and they ended up in the 1930s.
Yeah. Have you heard about the island in the middle of the Irish Sea that's not the Isle of Man that people see? This is a weird one. People flying, it's usually flying from like Liverpool to Belfast or from London to Belfast. When they go past Anglesey, they report seeing a massive island that's too south to be the Isle of Man, that has cultivated fields, and they see the whole country down there with towns and villages, and it's huge. It's much bigger than Anglesey, and it fills up a big section of the centre of the Irish Sea, but it's only ever been seen by passengers and planes, and it's never been seen. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. But this is the altered reality thing. Do you remember about 10 years ago? And it's incredible stuff. You've heard this thing of cities that appear in the skies. Charles Ford covered it in his book. And there was a famous case that a city of Baltimore was seen over Cork, and all the residents of Cork were looking up and they could see this. And well, that was captured on TV cameras in China. And go look for it. And it was broadcast on Chinese television that above a waterfall, a massive city is shown. And you can see it, and it spooks you right out. And you can see the cars and the people in the streets in the waterfall. And they called it a Fata Morgana, which is a kind of an effect that's called, but it's nothing like that. It doesn't create three-dimensional cities on a waterfall. And there was all these photographs about 2 or 3 years ago, in fact, right before the whole Rona thing, of ships floating in the sky off the coast of England. And there were some remarkable pictures. And they're getting, oh, it's a Fata Morgana. But that's not what Fata Morgana is. It doesn't cause ships. These ships were not. If Fata Morgana would look like the ship was at normal sea level, right? And the sea was gone underneath it. That's the optical illusion. These ships are up in the sky. So look, that's, we should do this for a future topic. But you look at that. If you can dig out that footage about yourself, Sarah, and people at home, of the Chinese city in the waterfall or in the lake, and they're interviewing Chinese people on camera, going, "It's the most remarkable thing. There's a city over there." And who knows? Isn't nature amazing? The optical illusions it can create.
Was the city actually in the sky, or was it reflected as though it was
It
in the
was in the
sky?
waterfall. There's a kind of a waterfall lake area with like steam, and there was a city floating in the actual a city center floating in the water vapor, and you could see the camera zoomed in. You could see streets and cars and everything.
When was this?
Oh, about 10 years ago.
It was not
And
long ago.
no, and there was other reports too that people took photographs of cities in the middle of the ocean, and and then it kind of stopped. It hasn't happened since. And then right before about 4 years ago, the oil tankers and big ships floating in the sky. And they're trying, oh, the Fata Morgana. It's not, they were in the sky, they weren't at low level. And there's one incredible photograph of the south of England of a ship that's like up in the sky. And the guys who took the photograph said, no, it wasn't on the sea. It's just like a cable was in the photograph. The ship was in the sky.
Makes
So
you,
this is all the matrix all being ripped apart, you know?
is this because we're seeing into parallel universes there?
Exactly. That's what I would say. You know, oh, what our ancestors called fairyland. See, that's what that's what I think fairyland ultimately is anyway, parallel universe, and that's what they were seeing. But it was remarkable. 10 years. I remember that Project Camelot TV show, internet show. They even covered some great photographs of it, and but the one was on Chinese national television, and they're going a remarkable effect caused by blah 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 blah. By it's known as a Fata Morgana, and it wasn't. It was exactly the same. It was the same thing that happened in a visual form that happened to me when a Providence radio station went across the Atlantic and came into my transistor radio.
A blip.
Space folded. Yeah.
Did Coast to Coast ever cover it?
I haven't a clue. I don't remember George Norrie or Art Bell doing it. But
Right.
the videos were definitely on YouTube, and they were from Chinese television. I'm sure, like people, we can't find it. Some of the sleuths online can find it in Rumble or somewhere on the comments. But yeah, and also the photographs of the floating ships. I think in some ways the floating ship ones were even more bizarre. So like if you're, and the fact that they're all involved in the sky, you from the original Charles Fort one, that was this guy Valentich actually going into an alternative reality, and he speed the process up by his heightened state of his nervous system, worrying about space aliens abducting him.
Did he cause the rip? Did he cause an opening? Did his
Yeah,
psychic energy actually manipulate the space time?
yeah, and he was all fired up because of the sightings in Melbourne the previous day and everything.
It's possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things, and well, in a true Fortean sense, we don't nail our colors to the mast. We only go along with what we look at all the possibilities without saying it was absolutely this or definitely that. We just throw out a true Fortean knows that it's rarely solved. It's unless it turns out to be a rational explanation, but there's all the possibilities stay on the table.
In 2007 on Channel 4, do you get Channel 4 over in?
Yeah. When I had TV, yeah.
Well, back in 2007, that was when I had TV back then. There was a drama called Lost, an American series called Lost about an aeroplane that it was called Oceanic. The flight, it was Oceanic Airlines, and it came down, and they all got stranded on a desert island, and they thought somebody was going to come and rescue them, and nobody came, and it got a little bit ridiculous because the island would move and it would end up in another part of the sea, and polar bears would turn up and other worlds would start appearing, and all kinds of strange electromagnetic phenomena would start taking place. And at the time I didn't really get it, and the ending to it was really stupid, and it turned out they were all in purgatory. They'd all died in the crash and they were all in purgatory. And I thought, well, that's a bit of a cop-out swizz. I was really angry because 8 to 9 seasons in, you've invested in it, and it was a really bad ending. But now I know more about quantum physics than I did back then. I wouldn't mind watching it again, because I'd wager that it would make a lot more sense, and there could even be some chaos magic in there, tapping into some kind of prophetic stuff that's happening now with reality. But back then, we didn't understand what it meant. But it wasn't a bad program. It just had a stupid ending.
Yeah, I mean, again, is all the stuff happening because of the amount of people waking up and stuff like that? Like in the past, they couldn't process it, but we can. And I often, I'm going off the tangent here, but do the controllers have to constantly rebuild reality or something like that to keep us trapped in this mystical in this illusion?
Do you think the controlling of the reality is a slipping off the timeline onto another one, hence the
Well, that's what I think.
Mandela effect?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm totally. That's one thing I do now. My colors to the mast on that we're actually going through a wave function collapse that started with 9/11, and we're getting when we see things going crazy like Dolly's braces and then recorrecting themselves and then going off again. That definitely we have the two realities overlapping, and you're seeing both at the same time. And funny enough, now that I think back other things, that's probably I've had a lot of strange experiences since 9/11 that would revolve around things like that, including seeing a doppelganger of someone I knew on the other side of the world. And yeah, I mean, I definitely think the wave function collapse is definitely related to the Mandela effect. But I think these things, they could happen on a micro level, like your man Valentich, whatever. But I think that we're going way off tangent here. But I think that the concept of parallel universes and altered realities have not been properly explored in either fairy folklore or alien abduction stories, which are both very similar anyway.
Yeah. And these parallel universes are also said to have different versions of you and me in them.
Like Anthony Peake has done some great stuff over the years on this kind of thing, this whole concept of Bohemian IMAX and all that. So yeah, absolutely. So this is why I've always been very wary of something being pinned down to one absolute thing, because then it foregoes, and especially if it's the mainstream narrative, like UFOs are spacemen and alien flying craft, that kind of thing. It's saying to me, look over here, look over here, look over here. Don't look at what it could be. And I think the Valentich story is full of that. I used to think for years that the Bermuda Triangle story was the whole thing of the Bermuda Triangle was just a part of the world where there were so many planes and ships sank, and it was just unfortunate. But now, after the discovery of the Bimini Road, which is probably part of Atlantis, off the coast of the Bahamas, in the Bermuda Triangle area, I'm now kind of inclined to think that maybe there is something after all to the Bermuda Triangle, and it's worth looking into it again, as if some kind of residue force from that continent that sank, maybe even a machine that's down there, is actually causing the effects. And now I've gone 360 on the Bermuda Triangle. When I was a little kid, I was fascinated. I read all the books on the Bermuda Triangle. I think I could do it again. And then as an adult, I said, you know what? It's probably just bad weather, pilot error, and a place where a lot of ships are in the area where the weather changes fast, tropical storms and so on. But now I'm back. Now I'm back to the high strangeness of the Bermuda Triangle. I really want to take a new look at it again.
It is I've always felt it was a very strange place, whether it was electromagnetic phenomena or geological disturbances. Something was causing problems there.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is the good thing about the Fortean thing. You change your approach as you learn new things and discover new things, and it says, "Oh, maybe I wasn't right about that, but I'll still keep it in the background." So yeah, and maybe we'll do a future show on the Bermuda Triangle with fresh eyes.
Yes, I would like that. Yeah.
Okay, so that was the story of Frederick Valentich, Valentius, however his name is pronounced, the pilot who saw a strange green light before vanishing over the Bass Strait in 19 78. If you have any more stories that you might think is applicable to this, or have your own theories, let's hear them, because again, it's, you know, the funny thing is that on Hocus Focus, we start talking about a topic, and what we realize then is that we're really not, we might go in with a canvas that has a painting on it, but we don't make a blank canvas. We make a new blank area around the original painting, and that all starts getting filled in. So if you have anything to fill in the blank canvas area next to the other 14 stories or rational stories, go ahead.
It's a good job when we're talking about these subjects, we're not doing Scotch nights and 40, because we'd have a bloody big headache by the time we finished.
I know.
And now it's time to grab your welly bobs and umbrellas as we go over to the weatherman with the atmospheric insights of the week ahead. It's Thomas with the psychic weather.
Well, after a pretty intense weekend of spectacular auguries and remarkable synchronicities, coupled on one side being mirrored by absolutely wildfire Renfielding on the other, I do believe that we're now entering into a new cycle of consciousness, and this is a very important psychic weather report, warning even. What regarding, I have to be careful use my language here because it regards the ping pong, but what 3 days ago seemed like, oh, if they do it again, if they bring back in restrictions and all that stuff, lockdowns, it's just laughable. Over the last 48 hours has turned into something very, very different, as if a dark level of consciousness that has set all these Renfields off and fired them up. They're literally flapping their arms and jumping up and down, both on social media and in the real world. It's classic Renfielding. If you see anyone Renfielding now, you've got yourself a primo, specimen. And I strongly suspect that the dark forces in this world are moving again, and they're going to try something for the autumn, the late autumn, I think. And we know what it's going to be related to. We know that it's going to be a way of hiding the sky dyes and highway dyes, and they're going to bring out the new boy, I say boy, in order to cover this up. But already, I thought this would not fly, but immediately already I'm seeing the cowards, the unmanly men, already looking at the face nappy in the drawer and having memories of when they were walking around in a state of fear. And I think we're in a bit of danger now. I think something tells me, look, I'll put this into one thing. Yesterday, I had a remarkable experience while I was making a vlog in the car. I did know, but I'd forgotten that it was Lovecraft's 133rd birthday. Right in front of the dashboard of the car is a stone wall, and a small young rat stuck its head out and looked at me the whole time and didn't flinch. And the fact it was, the rats on the wall, obviously the Lovecrafty thing. I'd also mentioned that there was, in the video I also did that day, a different one. That video, the next video on Lovecraft, that I said the most Lovecraftian town in Ireland is Youghal in County Cork. And literally at the moment I said it, 2 fellas dropped dead at an Ironman competition down there for Mother Hydra's babies. So look, these things are happening big time. And something tells me, I'm reading all the auguries, we got kids, you got to protect them. I think this time they're going to go for the kids. And I think that was the symbolism of the young rat in the wall. I think they're going to go for the kids. By that I mean, and a very interesting letter was leaked out by an Irish school today, that they seem to have planned this weeks ago. there's evidence there that schools had secretly meeting with the health authorities here to plan a, the new term may be terminated soon. And I have a feeling they're going to do something like kids cannot go back to school unless they've been, boy, I say boy, or transubstantiated. So I think they're going to go really dirty this time. I think there's going to be these winter viruses now are going to kill a lot of the ones who are transubstantiated, as far as the rooster booster. And I know I'm straying out of the psychic weather here, but I'm not really. But I tell you something, folks, the last 24 hours, literally reality collapsed before me, and I saw through everything. And other people have been feeling the strange wave of darkness now rising in the zeitgeist. I think the globalists are in a lot of trouble, and they're looking for something really big. The mess in Eastern Europe hasn't worked out for them the way they thought it would end up. And there's other issues going on as well. They can't hide the suddenlies and unexpectedlies. And so again, what does a rat do when it's backed into a corner? That's what we're dealing with them, because they can't hide the stuff forever. So again, we'll get through this. Don't worry about it. But I think we need to watch the auguries, any kind of strange animal sightings. Now, it's quite remarkable that Sarah and I have been talking about myomancy a lot in recent times, both on the show and off the show, and then this happens to me. So, the gods move in mysterious ways, but they communicate to us mere mortals through auguries and signs. And you have to keep your eyes peeled and keep them sharp. And if you're feeling a sense of darkness right now, there's nothing wrong. There's everything right. And if you see people Renfielding online or Renfielding in the workplace or around you, you probably need to stay away. Online, you can block them easy enough. And just stay away from them, because these people are they stop you from creatively thinking with wetico and getting out of this. So don't let anxieties burn you out, just like in the psychic hygiene. Don't ignore auguries. If you see a strange animal sighting, strange things, everything has a meaning. Pay careful attention without becoming absorbed in it, and get rid of all the Renfields around you now. Anyone who's trying to move you into toxic behavior or negative behavior or anything like that, you're going to, again, the greatest education too could happen. And now the most important part of this psychic weather, extremely important, right? Don't self-hex this thing into reality. Be very careful around people who are doomers and truthers, who are saying they're going to do this, they're going to do that, because you can actually make it happen. The best thing in the world today, I'm ready for the worst. If it happens, I'm going to live my life, and that's the end of it. So, create ways to not think about it, not ruminate on it, and stay away from the doomers. Doomers and Renfields are very similar. They're often the same types anyway, but be very careful. There's a dark force over the world. The psychic weather is right now a big black cloud. However, shelter, and that's a psychic weather.
On Saturday night, I went to bed and I felt like something was wrong. I didn't know about what was possibly what the rumors were at that point, and I just felt like something was wrong. And I thought, I wonder if somebody's going to be ill or picking up on something. And I just felt miserable. No reason. It came out of the blue. Just felt miserable and was expecting some bad news to come. And then on the Sunday, when I got up and went online, and I saw what these rumors had been leaked about possible restrictions and things, and I knew it was that. I knew it.
We have to be very careful the language we use. We could say, so it's coming, say, replace that with they're going to try it, and specifically try it. Don't say they're going to do it, because we're fighting psychic warfare here too as well. But
Yeah.
absolutely, that's why I felt it. I mean, I nearly fainted when I got home that night and saw that these two guys had of all the thousands of towns in Ireland, the one that I'd mentioned that day, where the two guys died of Mother Hydra's babies, and they died in the sea. You know, and a place I call the most Lovecraftian place in Ireland. And you know, these things happen for a reason. You know, these things happen for and a little rat staring at me the whole time. You know, so the myomancy thing is off the scale. Now we do know, and you know this yourself, Sarah, from other broadcasts we did, that myomancy also is often related to the downfall of the leadership,
Especially tyrants.
tyrants. So bear that in mind. The rats emerging from the walls could also be a good augury that they're going to be found out, but they're not going to give up. I mean, you know, there's never going to be a salvation. There'll always be try something on us. But again, create, don't ruminate. I sound like the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Create, don't ruminate. And that's it. Very important, but do not self-hex. Be very careful how you talk about this. Don't say they're going to do this, or they're going to try. They're going to try it. Don't say it will happen. Oh, they want it to happen. You know, always make it a question rather than a definite statement. Because you know, there's enough of us to actually change reality. If we change, if one person alone can change their own reality by changing their language, word spells, if we all do it, this is why stay away from doomers, stay away from truthers right now, because they will self-hex us into manifestation.
Noted and understood. Be careful of your language.
Very, very much so, especially what you know, what you speak, you know, abracadabra. You know, the Sanskrit word virth. It's the same. It's the root of word, and it literally means to create a disturbance in the Maya, in the abyss, in the void, in order to create the unmanifest into the manifest. So you people have to understand how the earth in Sanskrit is so powerful.
I'm wondering, Thomas, what you'd seen about the two men from the Iron Man contest and Mother Hydra's babies and going in the sea, dying in the sea. And I'm wondering if that is the gods saying, get out of the way. It's not for you. Get out of the way. Just like they say in the Lovecraft stories, don't go there. If you don't go in there, you'll live a happy life.
Yeah, I kept hearing that song by the Seventh Wave by Kate Bush on the Hounds of Love album. And she goes, "Oh, you fishermen, get out of the water." And I keep hearing that line, "Get out of the water." There you go, listen to that song. And I kept hearing that so strongly. I don't mean physically get out of the water, but you know, again, the gods communicate to the mortals through auguries and synchronicities. Even if you don't believe in the gods, you know, that doesn't mean that they don't believe in you.
This week, Thomas and I have cracked open the spines of two of our books that have had a profound impact on us. And it's here now that we show and tell them to you so as to inspire you for your next addition to your own Fortean bookshelves. And as always, we'll put the associate links to the books that we review in the description box. So if you do wish to purchase them via our links, we'll get a few pennies to put back into our future content creation. And this week, my book is called In Tune with the Infinite Mind by Anthony Talmadge. And it takes you on a journey beyond the limits of conventional understanding of the mind. And it joins quantum science and paranormal to give a perspective on how to use this life-changing mind power that resides within our infinite mind or superconsciousness. And the book covers quantum physics, the unified field, morphic resonance, as well as covering paranormal goodies such as poltergeist activity, elementals, premonitions, demons, possessions, prayer, and rituals. It covers all sorts of mind phenomena such as child prodigies, healing, dowsing, and the author even ties each and every one of these subjects into the umbrella of the quantum physics in a very simple way to understand. And the book also uses real-life instances of this power, from a young boy's amazing calculation of the cube root of a complex number to a journalist's unexpected encounter with the spirit of Princess Diana. And there's even an account in here of a dowser who somehow defied geographical constraints to locate a stolen harp that was thousands of miles away on the other side of the world. Now, these stories and many other examples are given as proof of the incredible potential that lies within the realm where quantum science and the paranormal come together. And the book explains in a clear way the complexities of cosmogenic energy and how to tune in to the unified field, both for the benefit of your own life and also on a collective global scale. So if you're interested in quantum science, the paranormal, and the realms of human capability, this book has got it all. And if you're a fan of Colin Wilson's books, then this book is also tailor-made for you as well. And I'd just like to finish my review by just reading a short piece on parallel worlds, funnily enough. So the book says, for years, parallel universes were a staple of science fiction writers who loved to speculate on the possible other universes which might exist. But now it all seems they're wild flights of imagination and not so wild after all. Parallel universes really do exist, and they are much stranger than even the science fiction writers dared to imagine. Scientists now believe there may really be not just a parallel universe, but there could be an infinite number of parallel universes, and we just happen to live in one of them. Early in the 20th century, science caught up with the world of the paranormal, and mystics had long claimed there were hidden realms beyond our human senses full of ghosts and spirits. But the last thing science wanted was to be associated with superstition. But ever since the 1920s, physicists have been trying to make sense of that uncomfortable discovery that we discussed earlier, when they tried to pinpoint the exact location of atomic particles like electrons they found, and it was impossible. They discovered the reality was stranger than fiction, that particles really did have the ability to be in more than one place at one time. And this has led to modern physicists to postulate an infinite number of universes, each with a different law of physics, and our universe could be just one bubble floating in an ocean of other bubbles. And those other universes contain space, time, and strange forms of exotic matter. Some of them may even contain you and me in a slightly different form. Astonishingly, scientists believe that these parallel universes exist less than 1 millimeter away from us right now. In fact, our gravity is just a weak signal leaking out of another universe into ours. And it all started when superstring theory, hyperspace, and dark matter made physicists realize that the 3 dimensions we thought described the universe weren't enough. And a widely accepted theory is that there are actually 11 dimensions comprising of membranous bubbles which ripple as they wobble through the 11 dimensions. Neil Turek from Cambridge and Bert Ovrutt from the University of Pennsylvania and Paul Steinhardt from Princeton believe that when 2 of these bubbles collided, there was a very big bang and a new universe was born, ours. This means it might well be that the Big Bang wasn't really the beginning of everything after all. Time and space all existed before it. In fact, Big Bangs may be happening all the time.
That's a real old school Fortean book. That definitely is the kind of thing I like, and a great reference library one.
The good book.
It reminds me of those books, the Fortean letters, It Happened to Me. Similar kind of thing, like unbelievable experiences. Yeah.
It happened to me.
Yeah.
Well,
There's it was a long running feature in 14 Times, still is, I think. But they put out books called "It Happened to Me" with like readers' personal stories of these incredible events and things that happened. Okay, my book this week is John Michael Greer's Monsters: An Investigator's Guide to Magical Beings. I only just recently finished this book after Jason Heppenstall, who'll be speaking at the Mysterious Earth Conference soon, had said that it absolutely terrified him. Now, John Michael Greer is an occultist and a writer. He's very, very productive. He has a fantastic website I really enjoy reading and looking at. And he covers the gauntlet here. It's a beastery, monstery. You've got vampires, you've got werewolves, you've got spiritual beings, you've got cryptid. But because he has an occult training, he has a whole other and far more mature way of looking at it than we normally get. In fact, there's even a chapter on doing these paranormal investigations and how to protect yourself spiritually. So he brings a lot of his own occult schooling in the Golden Dawn to help him. So he deals with things like, it actually has very good graphics describing how to do things like the Rose Cross ritual and stuff like that, how to properly investigate a paranormal location for footprints and everything like that, and a much deeper dive into these topics of werewolves, vampires, mermaids, etc., than you get anywhere because of his obviously vast knowledge. His knowledge of fairies and fairy beings, I have to give kudos to. Not being Irish, he doesn't live here like me, and I have to say he was right. He got it great. He got it perfect. He understands the concept of what a vampire really is, and it's a combination of a reference book, like a bestiary of what they are, but also in his more mature and erudite and educated way of looking at these things, coupled with doing your investigations and also incorporating both natural and ceremonial magic. And he gives lots of very good, sensible advice. Things like, go through everything else before. Make sure the person doesn't have mental illness. Make sure you don't have delusions. This kind of thing. And highly recommended. I read it in like 2 days, and it's a fairly big book. One complaint that's not his fault: I do not like this format of a bigger than A5 size with double columns. I find this very difficult to read. It would have been better if it was an A5 format or even A4 with just one long column. I don't like two columns on the same page. Maybe it's just me, but I find that quite difficult to read. So I found myself reading the book like this, blanking out the column, because what happens is it's like my mind, I'd shoot over the other column, a word would catch my eye, and I'd lose my train of concentration on this column. That's purely down to the graphic designer and the publisher. It's not his fault. Otherwise, yeah, get it. It's fantastic. It's a book that people who watch this show will really get a lot from and enjoy. John Michael Greer's Monsters: An Investigator's Guide to Magical Beings.
What's the picture on the front there? Is that a pair of glowing eyes, or
a pair of dark eyes, like that, like a Mothman or a demon or something?
Right.
Yeah. Very good cover, actually.
So you got some illustrations in there?
Yeah, I'll show you. Each chapter has its an illustration of the being, and he talks about the level of liminal perception, subliminal perception shown in these charts, and then say like, so there's the vampire section. We can see that. He's got these very nice illustrations of chapter headings, and then in the description, practical things dealing with natural and ceremonial magic. And he's very good on bang on the whole theory that I subscribe to, that the fairies, he calls them the fae, use the English word, are related directly to the aliens experience. Yep, totally down with that. You know me. That's one of my big maxims. And it's jam-packed with information and stuff, and other ideas of looking at it. Demons, and that's the ceremonial magic is pretty big in that section. because obviously because of grimoires and stuff like that, and how to investigate a paranormal site.
Got it
So,
all.
you know, and he gives a brief introduction to ritual magic and the meaning of the pentagram, the Celtic cross, the Rose Cross ritual, which we've all done when we were learning magic when we were starting out, the Western magical tradition, and so on, and a phenomenal glossary at the back of other sources. So that I can't say enough about it. It's and thanks for Jason Heppenstall for recommending it. He's an excellent writer too, a very good writer.
Well, we've come to that time of the show where it's time to say goodnight and to say thank you for tuning in and for joining us. And don't forget, the live chat is there for you to put your thoughts and keep in touch with each other. And the comments are there for your opinions and any good films that you think we might enjoy, any books of your own that you think we might enjoy as well. Please feel free to recommend your own literature in the comments there as well. So thank you again for joining in, and please don't forget to share us everywhere, because you're our only form of advertising. Tell your friends all about us. The numbers are getting quite big now. The series is growing, and it's really nice to see it grow. And as always, we've got the merchandise available, and the links to the merchandise is in the description box. And I need to check, but I think at the end of the month, there may be another discount coming up in the store. So keep your eyes peeled for that. All the books that we've reviewed tonight, we'll put the affiliate links into the description box as well. So if you want to purchase a new book, you can do it through there if you choose to. Twitter accounts, that will go into the description box as well. And I can't think of any other links. Have I missed any?
No, don't forget there's a Hocus Pocus page on Facebook.
Yeah.
And subscribe, hit the bell, and share on social media. That seems to be where we get our new audience. Like the episode we did on the BBC, we got a whole load of new interested people from sharing that on social media. So so thanks for all your support and everything you've done so far. And we've decided on the final cover design for the book, which is still a bit off. We're still a bit, we want to make sure it's right. There's basically a primer guidebook for the topics we cover on the series, and in a kind of a philosophical way, which I think will make it different than other books than the straightforward 14 book. And lots to look forward to, and keep the suggestions going and so on. It's I do believe, and I think Sarah would agree with me, that the veil is starting to wobble again. This around for some reason around this time, and there's more paranormal 40 and stuff happens. So don't forget to send us stories that you think might be included.
If you've got any topics or any subjects that you might want us to research and look into and discuss on here, then throw those into the comments as well, and we'll make a note of them. Usually it's at this point that I will say, don't forget we're on Beyond Room 313 next week, but we got a little bit of a change due to some events that are coming up. So next week it's going to be on my channel again, because Thomas will be busy preparing for his appearance at the Mysterious Earth conference in St. Anne's. So he's not going to be available to do the production and the edit. So it'll be back on my channel again next week.
Yeah, thanks for carrying the load on that one, Sarah. That's I just can't. I just won't be around to do it. But so don't forget, stay on Sarah's channel next week, and then in a couple of weeks from then, I'll be back up. Well, the next one will continue on mine.
Yeah.
So that's great. Thank you again, Sarah.
Oh, thank you.
And you're going to give us, before we go, what the tarot card is.
Yes, I am. Let me just grab that. The Magician. And the Magician card is a symbol of boundless potential and personal empowerment. And the card sums up the realization of your innate talents and mastery of your chosen pursuits. And the magician is looking upon a table with symbols representing the 4 elements: earth, air, fire and water. And these elements symbolize the forces and tools at your disposal. And the raised wand pointing towards the heavens signifies a deep connection between the spiritual and the material realms. And it also shows your unique ability to bridge the gap between the ethereal and the tangible, between dreams and reality, bringing ideas down from the subconscious into the conscious, with all the tools on the table needed for you to manifest your desire. It's like reaching into the reservoir of infinite potential and channeling your aspirations into the realm of action. It's the ultimate personification of as above, so below. And notice that the magician's table is filled with the symbols from the minor arcana. And this speaks volumes because it shows you that the resources, tools, and opportunities needed to shape your ideals are not beyond your reach. And the card reassures you that your skills and wisdom are already sufficient to bring about change. It's a call to trust in your abilities and have faith in your untapped potential. Very similar to what my book review tonight was talking about in regards to the infinite mind and the power that it holds. However, as with all power, the magician comes with a caution. Proceed carefully. It's a caution against the misuse or manipulation of power. While encouraging you to embrace your authority, it also emphasizes the necessity of ethical and principled actions. True mastery is not just about brandishing power, but also about using it for the collective good. What's more, the magician reminds you that your thoughts demand action. Remember last week's Page of Cups and the unexpected flash of inspiration of a creative idea coming out of the blue? The magician is a great reminder that great ideas, no matter how great they are, need action, and it asks you to take control of your circumstances and actively pursue your aspirations. And above all, the magician card stands for the extraordinary potential within you, and it calls on you to wield your power responsibly, secured in ethics and integrity. And as you tap into this energy, remember that you possess the capacity to manifest dreams and align the intangible with the tangible through action. And with the magician at your side, your journey will be one of meaningful creation and growth.
Also, the card of expertise, mastery, and proficiency. So in a kind of a non-esoteric sense, in that kind of reading, it would apply to someone who's just about to finish their degree in college or university, or an apprenticeship, someone who's got finished their apprenticeship and they're now going out into the world to take the skills and the techniques they've learned and put them into practical use, which is the same kind of thing of drawing down from somewhere else, putting it into something else. It's magic in the true sense, taking something from the non-material world and bringing it into the real world. So, it could, you could be, you think of your training as an apprentice or in college, studying for your degree, you're taking that knowledge finally and putting it into action. So it's a very good card for things like that. So if you were like if you were doing a degree and you're wondering, you're getting fed up, or doing an apprenticeship or doing a course and saying, should I give up on it? If that card came in the negative side of inverted, it would probably say it's not for you. Go do something else. If it was in the positive, it would say, yeah, finish your degree or apprenticeship. It'll all work out in the end.
Good night, everybody. See you next week.
Good night.